All right, so let's talk about energy healing. Why do we use energy healing? One starting point of using energy healing would be that you want to feel better. One starting point of energy healing would be that you have a lot of stress and things accumulated inside of you that you're trying to release. The danger with participating in things like that is that oftentimes when you talk about these energy healing modalities, is you going to someone who has some sort of technique who is basically doing it to you, so to speak, and within that is releasing something that's within and you feeling better. But the feeling better is used as the measurement as to whether it worked or not. And the thing is, you can use a lot of things to feel better. But the question is, what is the result that it has in your life? And also, what is your starting point in doing it? Here's the truth. When you're using an energy healing modality, it is not a solution. Okay, can it temporarily relieve some stress? Can it temporarily relieve some stress or something that's weighing you down, some pressure? Absolutely. But the truth is that stress, that pressure that you're experiencing that's being released will return. It will eventually return, because the stress, the pressure that you're experiencing that's stored in your body is being stored there because of a particular thinking pattern or behavioral pattern that you're participating in, that you have created within yourself over time, but initially starting with a particular thought or experience or reaction to something in the past that you've accepted, and now you're repeating that pattern. It's like ingrained in you. The energy healing itself will temporarily relieve the buildup of stress and crystallization that's inside, but it doesn't change the pattern itself. It can't change it because you created it. You created it through a decision that you made or a reaction that you had towards a particular event or something. Could be traumatic that occurred. And generally, it's something that happened to us where we felt we had to make a certain decision, or we thought we had to make a certain decision in order to survive more effectively in that environment or that situation or whatever was occurring. And so we create a mind construct, a thought pattern and a behavior pattern around something. And usually these things occur when you're very young. And so you have very little self-awareness because you don't yet have a vocabulary to understand the context of what's going on in your experience and the context of the consequences of the decision you're making, and that you're in essence solidifying within you as a pattern that will begin to repeat. And so this pattern will start to repeat within you, and you'll start to accumulate energy within that, which then starts to weigh you down, and stress and pressure builds up, and then you start to experience that. So when you use these particular energy healing modalities or devices or whatever, you will experience some temporary relief. Or you might not, but the point is, best case scenario, you will experience some temporary relief, but it's not a solution. The solution, if you really look at the world, you have to look at the context of the entire world that we live in, not just the context of your experience, because the context of your experience is biased. Most people, what is energy healing device? Kurt is asking, what is energy healing device? There's lots of things out there, so I'm not going to name anything in particular, but there's a lot of people, just to give more context for those who maybe are watching this and have no clue what I'm talking about. There's a lot of methods and devices and things out there that people use, especially those who are into like law of attraction and positive thinking and things like that, or just into like success and having a more effective mindset for success and that kind of stuff in general. For example, Scientology has like devices they use for clearing things so that you can apparently be better. So that's one example. But there's lots of things out there. You can just type it in, energy healing, and then you'll see all kinds of stuff. Not just devices, but also just methods and techniques and things. The point here isn't to call out anything particular. It's just to talk about the context of what they're useful for. So for example, here's an example that you might be able to relate to: acupuncture. Everyone's heard of acupuncture. It is an energy healing technology. It uses the energy meridians in the body and uses needles made of a certain type of metal to clear energy blockages in the body so that energy flows more freely. So it's kind of like, if let's say, okay, it's like this. It's like you notice that your tires keep getting worn on one side, and so you rotate your tires, but it doesn't correct the alignment in the actual car, and so it's going to repeat that point. Now, that's a limited analogy, but the point is, in our body, is structured physically as information that we've accepted throughout our lifetime, essentially and primarily when we were in our first 7 years of age, because that's when we were most open to receiving and absorbing information directly without any thought process interfering or filtering the information. And so what that means is you're basically subject to the patterns, behavior patterns, thought patterns, speaking patterns, and the education and the environment of your parents and those who were in your immediate environment when you were very young. So when you look at the problems in your life and then you look at your parents, you'll see it's all stemming from that. And then the point is not to go into blame your parents, because they're products of their parents and their environment, etc. It's a very difficult, challenging problem to face, because there can be a sense of overwhelming sort of dejection, because it's like, well, how the hell can I change all of that? It can be changed, but it will take time. And even if you change it on an individual level, it doesn't mean everything in the world changes. See, there's this belief in a lot of the positive thinking, law of attraction circles. We're all just monkeys. Maybe so. But there's this belief in a lot of the positive thinking, law of attraction, especially New Age circles, that it's like you create your own reality. And that is true to the degree that we all have this ability as human beings to create a dimension inside of ourselves where it's like, where we call in our heads, where it's like we tell stories to ourselves, and that's where we judge, and that's where we think, and that's where we argue with ourselves, and that's where we compare ourselves to other people, and we create a story about our life inside of our heads. And that little dimension is, yes, that is a reality that we create, but it's not reality, because reality is something that has physical consequence. The story in your head has no physical consequence. The only consequence that it has is that you distracting yourself with it, and yet your body is going throughout your day doing particular actions which generally have nothing to do with the story you're telling yourself in your head. And those actions that you're doing on a daily basis were programmed into you in your first 7 years of your life. And really think about it for a moment. Consider, in the first 7 years of your life, who was really in charge? Was it your parents? Like, can you actually blame your parents? Because who was really in charge? The house you live in. Did your parents build that house? The subdivision you live in. Did they build that subdivision? The country you live in. Did they write the laws? Did they create the school system that you went to? Did they design and produce the television programs that you saw as a child? Did they actually themselves create all the food that you ate and all the advertising that you saw? Very little of it did your parents direct. Mostly the environment is shaped by the bigger system of our world. And yet there's no one person who's controlling all of that. It's something that we're all accepting and allowing. And yet there are some people who get up and go to work, and their job is to create the advertisements that your children will see. Or their job is to create the television programs that your children will watch. Or their job is to go and be the teacher or be the superintendent at your child's school, or be their doctor or be their dentist, or any myriad number of things. We're all going through our days and in some way participating in the bigger system that is then influencing us and our children and future generations, because it's creating the environment in which we're growing up. Now, what does that have to do with energy healing? Because what I've noticed is that people utilize energy healing to de-stress from the stress that's placed into us through our environment. A major source of stress in people's lives which people probably don't maybe realize. Like, you'll recognize it when I say it, but you won't necessarily have considered that it's a continuing source of stress, is school. Because when you think about the context of school, you consider how stressful it is and how stressful it makes learning. And I saw something from Elon Musk where he pointed out that our brains are designed, and he said, through evolution, whether you believe that or not, but the point is they are designed in a way to reject things that we perceive as irrelevant and we don't understand why. And when you really think about it, did you really understand why you were doing anything in school other than, well, I have to get a good grade so I can get a good job, etc.? And not even every student thinks that. So think about it. You learn history and you're like, why am I learning this? So you're not really going to understand it. All that's going to happen is little seeds are planted in your mind so that later on in some news article it can be brought up and certain words could be triggered within you that will direct your behavior patterns and your thought process towards a certain concept so that you will behave in a certain way. And the same thing is done with regards to medicine and literally every area of our lives. Everyone thinks that you have to be smart to understand math, for example, because most people in school thought that math was totally irrelevant, and the way it's taught was very stressful and very confusing and didn't make any sense. And a very simple concept of that is, I've been a math tutor for quite some time. That was my primary profession before doing what I do now. And when I would work with students, a very basic concept in mathematics when you're in high school and in middle school as well is the concept of a function in mathematics, a function. And you might remember hearing that term, a function, f of x equals something, or y equals 2x squared or something like that. And it's interesting because I would have worked with students. Let's say I got a student in their sophomore year or junior year of high school, and they're having problems in math, and they would be having some problem in some, there's like, let's say some unit they're working on, and it's talking about some kind of functions, assuming that they understand what a function is. And I would ask them, like, what is a function? And they would sit there like tongue-tied, like, well, it's and I'm like, do you really know? And they're like, well, yeah, it's this. And they would write something down. And I'm like, that's not a function. That's just some symbols you wrote down. What is it? Explain to me what it is. And they couldn't do it because they didn't know. Because the way in which they learned it, there was no real context and there was no real transference of understanding. It was just a memorization process. And so they never really understood it. And so later on, when the assumption is made that they do understand it, and therefore it's kind of like if I said, let's say I was talking about, I'm trying to think of an example that many people can relate to, but the only thing that comes to mind would be like cooking. Like, let's say it said, okay, you need to simmer the water, or simmer the vegetables, or let them simmer, right, let's say. But like, you don't really understand what simmering means. Let's say you think it means boiling, or you think it means frying. Like, you don't really understand what it means. Then every time that word is used, you're going to do something incorrectly, or you're going to be confused and be like, well, why would you simmer it here? Without understanding what that word means. So the same thing happens when students are learning mathematics. Is a word like function, which is actually very simple and very foundational to understanding mathematics, they wouldn't understand, and that would cause a lot of stress, because when we don't understand something but we're expected to, then we feel stressed out because we don't know a solution. We don't know what to do with that information. And so we feel stressed because we want to do well. We want to show that we have knowledge. We don't want to look stupid as human beings. We don't want to look ignorant. We don't want to feel like we're a failure. And students think that because they're told in many ways, some subtle and not so subtle, that if they don't understand something in school or they get a bad grade, it's because they're stupid, or it's because they're not trying hard enough, or because their attitude is bad, which the simple fact is they were not taught effectively from the very beginning. And their parents probably didn't teach them to read effectively. And whether it's the fault of the parents or whether it's a simply not taking full responsibility due to inability to do so, that's not the point. The point is children are not being prepared effectively to cope with the context of school effectively. And so it becomes a very stressful situation. Imagine you're at a job and you were not really effectively trained how to do anything, but then you're suddenly expected to do it all. Isn't that how many people experience their jobs? You go to college for 4 years and then you go to a job and then you're like, you have to learn everything from day one. Like, nothing you learned in school actually mattered. Many people can relate to that, I'm sure. So school is a extreme source, or is a source of extreme stress in people's lives that gets stored because at a very young age you're very impressionable, and then you believe that that's how learning is. And so even when I would present maybe something different than what people have learned, especially to older people, they will just flat out reject it without even asking further, and they'll use excuses like, well, you're not speaking to me in a correct way, and this, that's not very nice of you, and that's rude, and all this stuff. And it's like, if you were honest with yourself, you would realize that you do not have a solution to any problem in this world, and you're simply just coping. You're just trying to present something that other people will accept, and the feedback of them accepting it is that it's right. Yeah, Katie's making a pretty good point there. It's interesting because with what I see with energy healing is there's a lot of people who want to help other people. So this is not an attack on anyone. Don't get me wrong. There's many people out there who want to help others. But what I'm telling you is that energy healing itself, although it can be temporarily beneficial to a person who is under a lot of stress, is not a solution. And here's why. If you accept so far my premise that from a young age we have created and we have accepted and allowed certain patterns to be stored within us, and then we participate in them, and then we feed them energy by our participation and by our thinking and by our justifications, then what that means is we have created these patterns within us. And the thing is, there's no person or there's no person that can access that information for you. And so if another person has to come from the outside and access the information for you, and you are not becoming completely aware, self-aware of how you've created the pattern, what the information in there is, what it represents, why you accepted it, why it is not in your best interest to accept it, how to reconfigure the information so that it's more effective, and so that someone says they lost the feed. I don't know if that is on my end or yours, whatever, but if the healing, if you want to call it that, is not being done from the perspective of full self-awareness of how you've constructed the pattern, why you constructed it, why you accepted it, what was the context of the situation, whether it was actually ultimately to your best benefit to do so, and then making a decision to reconfigure the information, like literally making a new decision about it, finding the words that you're misunderstanding, finding the thought patterns, the beliefs, the behaviors, etc., that are not in alignment with what's actually best for you, and then changing that within yourself. If that's not being done, then it's not a solution. So it's easy. It's interesting because people will say they have solutions when they don't have solutions, because the solution is complete, total self-awareness of everything you've ever accepted in your life. Because if you truly believe that you are 100% responsible for your life, if you accept that and you believe that you create your own reality, then how can anything less than full, complete self-awareness of every thought and every feeling and every belief that you've ever accepted that is to your detriment, and you changing that, and you no longer accepting less than what you're fully capable of, how can anything less than that be a solution? And for those of you who are like, well, but I make my livelihood on selling people on ideas and techniques that are based on energy, that's on you. That doesn't make it okay just because that's the only thing you're aware of. So if you're looking at this and you're reading my words and I'm telling you I have a solution and you're rejecting it, that's on you. But the thing is, you're going to get to the end of your life and you're going to regret how you've spent your life because you didn't provide any real solutions. And look, if you're not aware of this and you're 100% unaware and it's no fault of your own and no one's ever told you about it, then okay, I guess, you can find some excuse when you die that will absolve yourself of all responsibility for how you lived your life. But if your goal is just to make other people feel good and smile at them and pat them on the back and let them wallow in their bullshit so that you can continue to make money and you can continue to feel good and you can continue to feel justified about how you live your life, then you're just a fucking loser and you're just a fucking another deceiver and you're just doing it with a smile on your face and you're doing it with a new set of vocabulary called positive thinking and law of attraction that gets a whole bunch of other suckers that are searching for answers and aren't realizing the simple fact that you are the answer to your life. 100% self-awareness equals 100% self-responsibility. Knowing who you really are and why you're here and understanding that completely is the key and the answer to life. There is no other answer. The answer is not feeling happy. Because even if the answer is to feel happy and to feel good, you believe that you are connected and one with all that exists, then you must be self-honest enough to say that not everyone in this reality is happy. And it's not because they're creating it. It's because you're participating in a money system that takes advantage of the fact that some countries who are abundant in resources, laws have been passed and agreements have been made that designate their currency as less valuable than the currency of other countries which have very few resources and yet have superior language skills and languages that allow them to write laws and take advantage of the low vocabulary and low education of these other places. And what you'll find in this world is that the countries that have the most resources, on average, by and large anyways, are the ones who have the poorest education, the poorest vocabularies as a whole. Look at the countries in Africa, extremely resource rich. Look at the countries in the Middle East, extremely resource rich. Look at the countries in Asia, extremely resource rich. And yet, poorest vocabularies, lowest education levels, the most subservient populations, the ones who are taken advantage of most. And then we see these weepy, teary-eyed commercials on TV talking about feed the children in Africa. So you're sitting on your fat fucking ass eating potato chips in front of the fucking TV watching Game of Thrones or football and, doing your fucking energy healing so you feel good about yourself while you're stuffing your face with potato chips. And then you're sitting there going, well, I'll send money to Africa or I'll do this because that'll help these poor children who don't have enough potato chips. But you don't fucking realize that you buying those potato chips and using money is creating the fucking starvation in Africa because of the way the money system works. And you're so fucking ignorant about how the system works because you're so fucking wrapped up in feeling good that you don't look at the reality of the world that we live in. And you don't realize that the whole purpose of energy healing is so that you can feel good enough for a minute that you can walk out of your front fucking door and go and do something that fucking matters with your life. It's not just so you can feel good. That is not the purpose of this existence. Because if it is, then how are you feeling right now? How do you feel when someone like me comes into your life and challenges you? Do you feel good? Because you're just bullshitting yourself. You're just bullshitting other people that it's all about feeling good because you don't even know how to feel good. And you know what? To be quite honest, the people who feel the best in this reality are the ones who are the best deceivers. Because not only do they deceive other people into basically just giving them money for providing zero value in their lives, but they are convinced themselves 100% that they're happy. How can you be happy if you are one and connected with everything in this reality when any single particle of existence suffers? Are you happy because you're a part of a group that pats you on the back and makes you feel good? Is that why you're happy? Because that's self-deception. Sorting out the problems in this world will require facing painful experiences. It will require reliving traumatic experiences. It will require looking at the nastiness that goes on in this world. Being a part of a group should support you to become more effective. It should support you to be able to stand up and to speak out more, to challenge bullshit that you see. And being a part of a group also allows you that when you fall down and you make a mistake, there's a group to support you. So it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to fall down. And if you're on your own and you think you can do it all on your own, then when that happens, it's very difficult to stand up. But I see so many groups in this world that are all trying to do their own thing instead of working together. And yes, I'm talking about Neothink. And yes, I'm talking about Jen. Because you have these two disparate groups which apparently work on the same principles. And yet I don't see neo-thinkers at the Gen events. I see some, so that's great. But I see many of them who stand in positions of authority within neo-think, at least in people's eyes, that are not at these events. And I'm like, why aren't they at these events? Why are they trying to do their own thing? Why are they trying to reinvent the wheel? If all of you losers had joined Gen and stuck with Gen from the beginning, Gen would be much more powerful than it is now. Because when I go to neo-think events, they're fucking boring. I'm sorry to say this, but it's like, they're fucking boring. They could be so much better if you just did what Gen is doing. And Gen could be even better if you would bring the neo-think principles and stick by them and bring them into Gen, because Gen could use some realism. Because everyone's stuck on like just feeling good and positivity. But then I see neo-thinkers doing the same fucking thing. Just measuring their results based on how they feel, not based on the results of what we're changing in the system. It has to be measurable. It has to be, are there people actually running for office? Are there people actually becoming more effective, speaking up? When you make a video, are you actually getting views? When you hold an event, are you actually getting people to come to the event? Not just, is it a great time? Yes, it has to be a great time. It has to be fun. And when we go to Gen events, they're fun. And when we go to neo-think events, I'm sure some of you have fun. But the thing is, we have very little time in this world to fuck around and to bullshit ourselves and to bullshit each other. And all I'm saying is, for those of you who can hear me, and many of you are not going to hear me because of the way I'm speaking, you're going to react instead, and you're going to use it as an excuse to not move further in your life. You're going to say, wow, this person, like someone said to me, oh, I can see what's in your heart because you're being rude. And it's like, you don't know what's in my heart. All you're doing is projecting. All you're doing is making excuses for why you are not able to realize that you don't have a solution for the problems in this world. And you probably don't care. You probably do not care about the problems in this world. If you're self-honest, all you care about is your own self-interest and survival. But the thing is, no one survives this world. Everyone is going to die. And so if you die, and you feel amazing the day you die, it was all for nothing if you didn't change this world. Because if you have children, or you have grandchildren, they're going to have to deal with the problems that we've left behind in this world. And it's going to be harder for them. Just like it's harder for us because the people before us didn't freaking deal with these problems. And so what I'm saying is, if you can hear me, then stand up with me as an equal. And let's actually sort out the problems in this world. If you need to do some energy therapy so that you can feel better, so you can move out of a certain stress situation, that's fine. But don't measure your success in life based on how you're feeling. Measure it based on what you're then able to actually do. What are you able to actually affect in this reality? Because we need politicians, we need lawyers, we need therapists, we need people who actually understand the problems in this world and can support people one-on-one and in groups and on TV and in all possible ways to actually realize what's going on in this world. Because until the problems of poverty and starvation are sorted out in this world, our self-interest and our survival will always be under threat. And then all life will be is putting on a fake face and a smile to take money from people. So those of you who might have reacted or been offended by what I was saying yesterday about just basically smiling at people and taking their money, you have to make money in this world. I'm not judging the point of making money, so don't get me wrong. But what I am saying is, present a real solution and be honest with yourself about it. And if you don't have a real solution, then talk to me, because I do. And I know I do. And if you're honest with yourself, you'll know that you don't. And so the longer we stay in like this bullshit ego about, fucking thinking that you have solutions when you know that you don't, because they don't actually affect a person's ability to develop real self-awareness and real self-honesty and real common sense. And the more you have to lie to people just to keep them coming back to you, just to keep them recommending you, the more you have to lie, it tells you don't have a solution. Because the more you lie and the more everyone lies, we teach our children to lie, and then we lie about what's really going on in this world, And the suffering continues, and the self-interest continues. And no solution ever comes forth. Because no one, it seems to even fucking care about a solution. What's the purpose of being in a group like NeoThink? What's the purpose of being in a group like Jinn? If it's not to actually change the world. Because lots of people say they want to change the world. I remember one of my mentors said to me one time, well, Cameron, a lot of people say they want to change the world, but they don't do anything about it. Yeah, let's do something about it, for real. And let's not utilize excuses like somebody's rude or someone is speaking negatively as an excuse. And don't act like you know what's in someone's heart if you don't know them. If you never met them in person, or you only judging based on 1 or 2 words or 5 phrases or sentences they put in a comment thread, and you saying you know their heart, you don't know their heart. I don't know your heart. But if you're rejecting something simply because of a few words and not asking questions, and instead simply coming in and trying to impose authority on something, that's bullshit. I'm not going to accept that, and I will call your ass out. I know someone right now who's laying in a hospital bed dying. And you know what? When you get to that point and when I get to that point, are we going to be okay with any level of excuse that we've given for why we weren't the very best that we could be? And what happens when you die and you have a moment to review your life and look at the consequences of every single word and every single thought and every single feeling and how it influenced other people and how it influenced the world that we live in? And when you see that all you really did the whole time was focus on feeling good in your own self-interest and you had zero effect in the world, will you grant yourself more life? Will you grant yourself more existence? Or will you say, you know what, I can't be trusted with this gift called life because I didn't even use it for anything other than just to extract some temporary feeling that I know doesn't last. Everyone knows happiness is fleeting. It's a temporary experience. Why is everyone chasing it? The more you chase it, the more you're going to experience the negative. Let's embrace the negative. Let's embrace the pain. Let's embrace the things that we don't like about this world so we can solve them. Because if we work together, we can create a system in this world that eliminates suffering, that eliminates poverty. And for those of you who are interested in eliminating death, that is not going to happen through technology where we live in a world where you have to fight for survival. That is like putting the cart before the horse. You can't solve the problem of death when people are not even self-aware of how we're all creating death. I mean, that is a whole other fucking can of worms. Death doesn't have to exist, but it's not something that we can even have any impact on whatsoever. And let me ask you a question. Why the hell would you want to continue living in a world where 90% of the world, 80% of the world at least, is in suffering and poverty, just so you can sit in a castle and be happy? Because eventually, even if you live for 1,000,000 years, they're going to come knocking on your door. So unless you're wanting to solve the problem of immortality so that you can actually change the problems in the world, hey, I'm cool with that. But let's just use the limited time we have to solve the problems of suffering and poverty. That way, if we can get to the point of immortality, it'll be worth it. But let's not use it as an excuse just because you're afraid of dying. Because if you're afraid of dying, then really you're just afraid of living. Because you don't know how to live, because you weren't taught how to live. And what I'm saying is, as a group, we can stand up together and we can actually do something that matters. We can actually work together. But not if we keep deceiving ourselves, not if we keep deceiving each other, and we keep offering bullshit limited solutions that just make people feel better. I realize that I'm talking to very few people that are actually listening to me, but you have to understand, I'm looking for those that are actually able to hear what I'm saying and are like, wow, I've actually been thinking these things too. There is a lot of bullshit going on, and I'd like to talk to somebody who actually cares and actually wants to make a difference. Even though I don't necessarily understand what it is right now, I want to find out. That's what I'm looking for. All right, so this is another video for today to call out the bullshit and to look for those who are willing to actually say, yeah, there's some bullshit in this world, and it's time to fucking stand up and do something that matters with our lives, because I don't want to fucking die and live in regret and realize that I wasted my fucking life just to try to make money, just to try to support my family, and when I die, I can't take any of that with me, and I don't even fucking know what happens when I die. If I'm being self-honest, if you're being self-honest, do you really know what happens? Do you really understand why you're doing what you're doing? You don't. You're just trying to survive. And look, you want to experience happiness and bliss? Solve the problems in this world. There's nothing else you can do more important than solving the problems in this world. Because then you can actually say, fuck, wow, I solved the problem. Like, I feel good. Now what can I do? Because right now you're trying to solve the problem of happiness. But what you don't realize is you're unhappy because of the world we live in being the way it is. It's not because you haven't learned how to be happy. It's like, it's so delusional to think that you can seek happiness on your own, but also believe you are one and connected with everything. That's a fucking cognitive dissonance. The problem why people think that they have to seek their own happiness is because they don't see a solution for how to solve the problems in the world. I know how to do it. There's lots of people I know who know how to do it. And I'm just looking for those who are like, you know what? I'm stuck in this fucking survival trap in my life, but I also see that there is a higher purpose I could live for. And that makes a lot of sense what you're saying. So let's find out how we can actually have an impact. And let's do something that matters with our lives. Because when you die, you don't get a second chance. I'm telling you right now, you don't get a second chance. Unless maybe you used the first chance wisely and you actually did something. Maybe you get a second chance. I guess we'll find out, won't we? All right. Talk later. Bye.